What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 41 of the See-Through Podcast, a weekly podcast that creates transparency on disabilities and the champions with them. I'm your host, Lance Johnson, and I live, create, and podcast from Brooklyn, New York, with an inherited retinal disease called retinitis pigmentosa, or RP for short. My guest today is a super special one. My guest today is Steve Way. Steve is an actor, stand-up comedian, public speaker, and even a substitute teacher. In fact, you may recognize Steve from his role on the Hulu show Ramy, where he plays himself. And speaking of that show, if you haven't heard of Ramy, it's an Emmy-nominated show. It was just renewed for its third season. It's legit. It's eye-opening. Go give it a shot if you haven't. In this episode, we talk about Steve's acting career, and Steve also talks to me about living with a rare muscular dystrophy, his stand-up comedy, his substitute teaching, public speaking, his advocacy for the disabled community, and much more. It's such a great episode. I'm excited to share it with you. But before you hear my conversation with Steve, make sure to follow or subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're currently streaming on. Also, make sure to follow the See-Through Podcast on social media. The handle is at See-Through-Pod. And with all of that out of the way, here's episode 41 with Steve Way. Enjoy. What's up, Steve? Thanks for chatting with me this morning. We're both here in New York, right? Or you're in New Jersey?
Yeah, I'm in beautiful New Jersey.
Cool. Yeah, that's where you grew up, right?
Yeah, born and bred.
Nice. Super stoked to be chatting with Steve right now. I have a long list of things. We probably won't get to all of them, but hey, we'll try. Could you tell the listeners who you are, and then we can move from there?
I mean, I'm kind of scared that'll be the easiest question. But yeah, I'm Steve Way. I'm an actor, stand-up comedian, speaker, writer, high school substitute teacher.
Yeah, a lot of things.
Yes.
Most people would think that I found you from your show, the show you act on, but I've been going to a lot of stand-up comedy shows lately, and I've been going to The Stand, and I saw, I was just kind of scouting out the list of shows coming up, and then I saw you on the list. And then I was like, oh, who's Steve Way? And then I looked you up, and I was like, oh, this would be a great interview. I've been wanting to have a stand-up comedian on this podcast for since I started this thing.
At the time of recording this, I have a pretty big show tomorrow night. So if you're around, come on up.
Yeah, because I'm here in Brooklyn, so.
It's not far. It's east side, Lower East Side, right up Houston.
Word.
Yeah, 7 o'clock. Come on up.
7 o'clock. All right.
Yep.
So we just kind of brought up two different things. I brought up the fact that you're a stand-up comedian, and I brought up the fact that you're also an actor. Which came first?
Oh, it was neither.
Okay.
It was the speaking that came first.
So motivational speaking, public speaking kind of.
Yeah, I've been public speaking since I was about 9 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty early on. I don't think I would be very good at 9. I don't even think I'm that good at age 30, so. Did that just get you going?
Yeah, I've always been comfortable being up on a stage.
Yeah.
Being in front of a group of people. And, growing up, I've always used comedy as kind of a coping mechanism. All my friends and family were kind of in on the joke, so it was never really uncomfortable. And then out of that just came acting and doing stand-up.
That makes sense. So at an early age of 9, you were speaking in front of crowds, and then you would use humor to kind of connect to who you were speaking with. And then so you kind of figured out that humor was kind of your window into connecting. That's it. That's an interesting approach to public speaking. You want the audience to feel comfortable and be able to listen to you and whatnot. And I'm sure that still is a continuous thing when you perform now.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, I was able to be accepted into this wonderful community of people who always treated me as one of their own. And it really motivated me to just stick with it and, never stop, just keep going.
Definitely.
And, I was a great group of people who always looked out for me, who always tried to give me a platform, and who just tried to make me the best person and comedian that I can be.
Yeah, that's important. I talk about that a lot on this podcast, just who your crew is around you, and how much that can just impact your personality and day-to-day just happiness. And now you're reaching more people. That's something that I'm fascinated with, is how the disability community is represented in like TV and film and pop culture, and so I'm assuming that you're probably 10 times interested in that than I am. But we can get into that later, I think, because I want to talk to you about your origins, because I went deep on your some of your YouTube stuff. Yeah, I was watching some of your web series, Uplifting Dystrophy.
That was a fun time.
Yeah, that was what, about like 7-8 years ago, 10 years ago?
That was 2012 or 2013.
Okay.
2013.
Yeah. But I even found like an older clip. It was like a Make-A-Wish Foundation video. That one was hilarious to me.
Yes, that was like my first, I guess, instance of acting like that.
Oh, that was the first one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was the oldest one on the channel.
Yep.
So I had to watch it, and the humor is very distinct, and that's kind of what I want to talk about, because you have muscular dystrophy. What specific kind of muscular dystrophy do you have?
I have what's called Ulrich congenital muscular dystrophy. And
Okay.
I didn't find that out until I was 25.
Okay.
Which is crazy.
So that's like a really rare form of muscular dystrophy.
Yeah, it's pretty rare.
It's always a weird thing to have something so rare. It's like you feel special, but at the same time, it's like, it's like...
But at the same time, I will never see any other treatment in my lifetime.
So there's no treatments or anything?
Not for me.
Since there's no treatments for it, you kind of have to just kind of wrap your mind around living and adapting and accepting, what it is, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I've done that my entire life anyway.
Yeah.
So why stop now?
What I love about what you're doing and why I brought you on is because you're doing that through comedy. And I've been thinking about this lately, because like I said, I've been going to a lot of stand-up comedy shows. I've always been a fan of comedic films and whatnot. But you can learn so much about society, culture, pop culture, news, politics. And you can learn so much about that just from listening to stand-up comedy. Because basically that's all that's being talked about, and it's talked about in like such a clever way that relays information to you, while at the same time making you laugh and making you think about something you would have never thought about before. So your form of comedy is like, you're doing that. You probably touch on a variety of topics, but you also touch on, life with your disability. And then the people listening to that comedy, maybe they've never been exposed to humor like that about that specific topic, and therefore you're like kind of opening planting a lot of seeds with audiences you perform in front of. How is it performing in front of people who aren't familiar with the disability community and whatnot? Yeah, how is it performing like that?
Well, I mean, it goes beyond them hearing my kind of comedy. I mean, a lot of times they've just never even seen someone that looks like me before. And that's pretty obvious when I get started, and they're very visibly uncomfortable, and they're not sure if they laugh at my jokes or not. But I think I'm good enough to where I'm able to read the room and, really get the audience on my side. Because, by the end of it, they're not just laughing, but they come up to me after the show and say, like, hey, Steve, like, one, that was very funny, and two, I didn't know that before. Whether it's about like your health care or like your job or stuff like that. It's really rewarding to have new people come up to me and say, that they learned something. Because I always made that a goal of mine. If I didn't change like one person's mind, then I think I did my job.
Yeah. You kind of have to like break them in a little bit. You have to like kind of make them feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, what I would say, like, most comedians don't have to do that up front, So I give you credit for having to work around that immediately on every show.
Yeah, but I'm not most comedians.
Well, there you go.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, and then I'm assuming, like, because your jokes are sometimes they're like pretty self-deprecating, But at the same time, it's like, not too harsh to where you're gonna make everyone like when I'm watching Ramy. It's hilarious. The humor is about some of the darkest humor I think I've ever seen. And there's one scene in particular, and I know I'm going all over the place right now, but it was on episode 3 of the first season, and it's when Ramy eats the gummy bear like that has THC in it, so he's like pretty stoned, and then he goes with you to what would be your house on the show. It's all fictional, and so he's sitting there with you and your fictional mom, and then your mom is kind of prepping some medicine for you, and like I said, he ate an edible, so he's feeling a little bit loosey-goosey, and he starts asking your mom on the show these like bizarre questions that are like and I've been doing this podcast, so I've been talking to a lot of people in the disability community, I've been getting a lot of exposure to various disabilities and various mindsets and whatnot. And even for me, I was like, whoa, I've never heard that sentiment expressed publicly. Because the questions were like to your mom, who's essentially your caretaker on the show, about does your life suck having to look after you? Is it weird knowing that your son's going to die? And then there's like a joke about getting a baby-sized coffin, and I was just like, whoa. And the scene can kind of be interpreted. I was like, I don't know if he actually said that stuff or is he just like imagining it, but I had never heard any sentiments like that like vocally expressed. And kind of what I took from it and where I'm going with this and what I want to ask you is, that scene was something brand new I've never seen or heard in TV show. Was that scene, did you have a hand in the writing of that scene? Because it seemed like it had a very specific goal in terms of the disability community and just kind of just addressing the elephant in the room kind of thing.
Something like that is an example of how things in this show might not be exactly true to life, but the feelings are real, the emotions are real, the topics are real. But how can we not talk about my eventual death in a show like that? Like you said, it's very dark. You have a character like me that you've never really seen before. We're talking about things that you've never heard before. So how do we not just go like super uncomfortable with it? But just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's not real.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's all real. We're going to say the uncomfortable things that everyone else is afraid to talk about.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I think it was, while it was super dark, it was also like refreshing in a weird way. The questions he was asking your mom in that scene, were those questions that you personally think people are thinking in their mind they're just not asking?
I mean, it's just all stuff we've talked about. It's all stuff that we've joked about before.
Yeah.
I mean, how would you not? I mean, why should we have to go through life just being so serious all the time and always worrying about not making people uncomfortable about me? It's my life, so why can't we talk about what I want to talk about? Why do we have to, hold everybody's hand and, make sure, oh, are you comfortable? Don't worry, I won't talk about this.
Yeah, I respect that, and I support that, and I want to see you go even darker, man. But yeah, I just I'll be honest, I didn't start watching the show until I had booked you on this interview. Then I was like, all right, I gotta watch some episodes. And I watched the first 4, and I don't plan to stop because I really like what I'm seeing so far. And what's kind of interesting about that show, besides being unapologetic in terms of the topics that address your life with your disability, is the fact that this show is, you basically play the best friend of the lead of the show. His name's Rami. Am I saying that right, Rami? I'm saying that right. Rami. All right, my apologies. So Rami, and he's actually your best friend in real life and has been for a while. So once he got booked on this show, and he's the creator of it, it's on Hulu. It's an Emmy-nominated comedy TV show. Were you originally written into the show, or was that something that happened later on?
Rami wrote my parts.
Okay.
But it was kind of the network that was hesitant having me in the show. Long story short, I had to audition for my own role.
And how was the audition process for that? Was it, did you feel like you had to fight for your role, or did you feel like Rami had kind of your back?
It was definitely both. I knew Rami had my back always. But I also knew that I was going to have to do more to sell myself than all the other actors were going to have to do.
Yeah.
That's just what it's like, being a disabled actor.
Yeah, so how many people auditioned, and out of those people who auditioned, how many of them were actually like people with disabilities?
I honestly have no idea, but I know there were different roles that I've auditioned for where I was the only wheelchair user for a wheelchair using role.
Yeah.
And I still didn't get it.
Wow.
So
that's kind of a hot topic in terms of disability rights and whatnot right now. Is kind of like representation in TV, film, pop culture. What's your stance on that? I'm just curious in terms of, are you against casting someone who's non-disabled for a disabled role, or do you kind of see like a gray area there?
No, it has to be authentic.
Gotcha.
It's gotta be real. You wouldn't do that for any other minority.
True.
So why should we be the exception?
That is very true. You can't do that with other minorities. Yeah, so I mean, that's interesting because you have a pretty big platform and you've been doing this for a while. You are a disabled actor. You go out for auditions and then you don't get these parts, but then you get this role on Rami, and you've been doing a lot of big stand-up shows here in New York. So your career, would you say your career is pretty popping off right now?
Yeah, I'd say so. I definitely have some things in the works that, I can't really talk about just yet. But cool. Yeah, there are signs that things are happening.
That's good to hear. So it sounds like you had this huge come up from, public speaking at an early age, kind of getting your bearings on how to use humor to connect with an audience. And then that is carried over into your acting and stand-up comedy. And now it's paying off because now you're getting roles and things are happening. So that must feel good. That must feel like reaffirming that you're on the right path. And I think that's amazing because, like you said, you want more disabled actors to kind of feel like they have an avenue to go down. If they want to go down the acting, they want to go down the arts path, and there's not a lot of representation currently. So you're a perfect example of that. It is possible. Yeah, I just respect that. I guess I just wanted to get that statement out there.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
So your career is going well. You got a lot of things going on, but that still doesn't detract that you have, your daily life to get by. You mentioned earlier that you're a substitute teacher. Are you still doing that, or is that kind of on the back burner now?
No, I actually did it last month, which felt really great because that was the first time I did it since March of last year.
Okay. And how long have you been substitute teaching?
I've been doing that since 2011.
Okay, so a long time.
Yeah.
So that must be like almost another type of audience that you're connecting to when you go into these classrooms, and it's like these younger kids, and again, probably unfamiliar with someone with your condition. Do you feel like there's another instance you find yourself having to break the ice through humor?
Yes and no.
Or do you just lay the law down, like, the teacher with a ruler and just,
No. I'm pretty chill at that job.
Okay.
I definitely use humor to break the ice, but this generation gets it on a level that adults don't.
Interesting.
They understand that the world sucks. That when they get out of high school, the world isn't really set up for them. The kids are angry because they know that they're gonna get the shit out of the stick. They know who I am. They know what I'm about, and they get it. So that really helps.
Yeah, that must help. And that is, I've never heard that take on this podcast before, so I'd like to explore that a little more. You talk about the younger generation. You think, like, I know that spreads across the board for a variety of things in terms of like social justice, just across the board. But in your specific case, you're talking about they kind of, through their familiarity with other social justice issues, they're able to kind of connect the dots with the disabled rights a lot quicker than the older generations can. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not even as specific as that. It's the struggles with healthcare, employment.
Yeah.
Access to anything. They see me and they think, oh, it's probably even harder for him. So it clicks for them.
Yeah, having it click when you meet someone, you can tell that it clicks with them. That's probably a nice feeling, because now you feel like you don't have to like tiptoe around who you are anymore. So that's kind of interesting that you said the younger generation, it happens quicker. And then you were just talking about healthcare concerns. Healthcare, yeah, that's a big topic. I was reading about something you had going on. I'd love you to either confirm it or tell me I got my sources wrong, fact check me here. But you've had a struggle with healthcare for a longest time, and there's a lot of issues in the sense that, like, even basic things, like if you were to get married, you would lose your health benefits and whatnot, and that just seems absurd to me. So I would love to hear your perspective on that and your experience with that.
If I get married, I lose my state health care. If I have more than $2,000 in my bank account, I lose my state health care. I can't really own anything in my name, or I lose my health care. Yeah.
So basically, if you have too much, they think that you can afford your health care on your own.
Yep, and that way I'm not disabled enough.
Okay. So yeah, not disabled enough. What would they constitute as being disabled enough?
I mean, it doesn't matter. It's all arbitrary.
Yeah.
I know people who are on paper less disabled than I am, but they get more like at-home care.
Gotcha.
The rules don't matter. It doesn't matter. It's all arbitrary. So
yeah, it definitely sounds like that for sure. Yeah. Basically, you have to work around those things that you were talking about, which it would be annoying as hell. So, like, what was your idea? I'm just curious because people listening might want to know, and they also might be in a similar situation. Is how would you personally fix this issue?
You just have to stop means testing everything. Everything in this country that we do is means tested. How much money do you make? What kind of job do you work? How much school did you finish? We can't just get anything without having to have some kind of string attached to it. And you can't do that with extremely vulnerable people, because people will always fall through the cracks, and people will always unnecessarily die because of it.
Yeah, no, that's the stakes are about as high as they can be, to be just kind of toying with whatever kind of legalities of what fits the criteria or whatever. Man, that's frustrating to even hear. Do you ever feel like you want to use your kind of voice? I know you talk through stand-up comedy and through acting, you advocate for the disabled community. Do you ever want to use your voice to even go deeper in down that road and to advocate for disability rights in terms of healthcare and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I have to. If I have this platform, not using it would be a disservice, not to me, but the entire community.
Yeah.
I have an obligation now to use this platform to try to make the changes that we need, not to just keep us safe, but to keep us alive.
Yeah, and I respect that too. It seems like you have a lot on your plate in terms of what you want to get out there in terms of messaging, and your platform is allowing you to slowly kind of release content that is addressing certain things, and I hope to keep seeing that trickle down and plant more seeds in people's minds. And it sounds like you have a mission, and it's a very worthy cause that you're trying to address. So again, I don't have much comment on that. I just want to say thank you.
No, thank you, man. I feel like, I don't know how many other people in my situation have, gotten to the level where I am or where I'm going to be.
Yeah.
This is kind of uncharted territory for the disabled community.
Yeah.
So I have to use it as much as I can.
No, yeah, you definitely do. And I guess you say you have to, and I know there's other people out there in pop culture who have the opposite stance, and they're like, oh, I have a platform, but why do I have to use it for X, Y, and Z? But with your specific, you feel you don't necessarily feel obligated, but you have a strong desire to, or do you feel obligated?
Well, I part of me does feel obligated, but it does not feel like a chore.
Yeah, you're passionate about it.
Yes, this is not something I'm dreading. This is not something I'm not looking forward to. This fuels me.
Yeah, I think whatever fuels you is definitely something you shouldn't ignore. Should put off out of fear of other people's uncomfortability or maybe shattering their mind a little bit. Again, respect. I do that with this podcast sometimes. Sometimes I talk to a variety of people, and every time I kind of through every conversation I have, my mind opens up a little bit deeper, and it's kind of my goal with starting this thing selfishly is that I kind of want to just be exposed to a lot and just kind of learn firsthand versus reading online. I could read about, you have a bunch of articles if I Google your name, and you have a bunch of interviews you've already done. I could go and listen to all those, but see, talking to you firsthand, it just kind of, just is a game changer. And I think that's kind of the beauty of you being on TV, you having social media platforms, you doing stand-up comedy, is that you're actually getting out there and meeting people and doing the same thing that you're doing to me, exposing me to new thoughts and realities. Yeah, it's a lot. You have a lot going on. Do you have a favorite avenue in terms of versus stand-up comedy, acting, disability, being an advocate for the disability community, or do you kind of lump it all into one thing and view it as one role?
Yeah, for me it's all one.
Cool.
For me, I can't do one without the other. I feel like I have to do all of them.
Yeah.
Because they kind of go hand in hand. My stand-up helps my acting, which then helps my speaking.
And teaching.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all just making people aware.
Yeah.
It's all giving people a different perspective. It's all educating people. And I love doing them all. And I love how one, feeds into the other. It's kind of like my own checks and balances. They're all fun. I all love doing it.
Yeah, I can tell too. I can tell you're having fun doing it. Like going back deep, I said I went deep into your old web series, Uplifting Dystrophy, and it kind of reminded me of my teenage years because I went to film school and I work as a video editor, and I made a few short films and whatnot. And it's nothing to brag about, but I'm just saying that because I'm kind of familiar with this. The industry you're in, and I'm familiar with creating films and working in the industry. And I got my start in high school making like these really silly films with my friends. And I could tell that energy was there in that web series you were making, it was just you and your friends having a blast, but at the same time making funny content that's relatable, but also like a good platform for you to kind of address the elephant in the room of your disability and the sense of humor you have. So it's kind of it's nice that it kind of, you get to have fun while being yourself and being passionate, and that's kind of the goal. So it's like, in a sense, like you're winning.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. We're always trying to create something.
Yeah.
We're always asking, what are we saying? I don't think you always have to say something.
Yeah.
But it's definitely important to have a clear, concise, and coherent message and voice. But for you, I think that you should brag about what you've done, because you created something, and nobody can take that away from you. And I think that's really special. Because I think it's really important for people to have, any kind of passion in life, no matter what it is. Because I think that it's important to have something that's like always there for you. And, nobody can take that away from you. And, I think that's special.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I do think it's special. And kind of how we talked earlier about how you kind of lump it all into one thing, your stand-up comedy, acting, teaching, public speaking. You kind of view it as one kind of art form of who you are and extensions of who you are and what you do. This podcast I kind of group it in because, I just do this for fun. This is just a side project I have, so it's like, I make $0 off of this, and it's a lot of time that I'm doing, investing into this thing because I believe in it and I get a lot out of it. Like you said, it's not a chore, it's not a chore. So it's fun and I get a lot out of it. Would I like to make money off of it? Sure. But like, as a video editor, I just kind of view this as an extension of like my art. And it feels like I feel very comfortable doing this podcast. It doesn't feel like a new venture for me. So I kind of wanted to use my natural talents to kind of create this podcast and talk to people because I love interviewing. I'm big into documentary films and whatnot. So it's like, yeah, I feel like I lucked up by starting this podcast and kind of catching the bug here a little bit.
But I feel like even with you, you're combining your love of so many different creative parts, and you're putting it all in one. And you can't really have one without the other.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I relate to what you said. It makes total sense what you said earlier about it being one thing. And I guess it's never clicked with me until just now either. You saying that now, I kind of am like, oh yeah, it is like one thing, So that's cool. And going back a little bit, like you mentioned, not everything has to have a specific message, like because I definitely don't want the listeners to think that everything that you do and everything you talk about is in relation to your disability. Like your stand-up comedy touches on a variety of subjects. Like what's some other topics that you like exploring?
Well, it's funny because I guess the main thing I try to make people aware of is that yes, I am disabled. I look different. I do things differently from you, but that doesn't mean I am different from you. I still have the same problems that the majority of society faces. Healthcare, getting a job, relationships, dating, housing, like people, like in politics, in like a presidential election. The disabled community looks for a disability policy. And I always try to make them aware that there's a very narrow-minded way of thinking. Because housing policy is disability policy. Climate change policy is disability policy. Employment policy is disability policy. So I'm not looking just for a PDF about what someone's going to do for disabled people. I'm going to look for how are they going to fight against climate change? How are they going to expand healthcare? How are they going to give access to more affordable housing? You know, it's really frustrating to see so many people in my situation be so one-dimensional when it comes to, like, our politics.
Okay. Yeah, one-dimensional. So you think that people focus too much on one specific policy when what you're saying is every policy is something that's going to affect you, which I agree with. And, you know, there's a common thing that I talk about here on this podcast because, you know, I have a eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa that affects my vision. And I talk to a lot of people with other, you know, visual impairments, but I also, you know, I talk to anyone in the disability community because I kind of felt like there's little cliques within different disabilities. Like I'm sure you probably see other people with muscular dystrophy and they only connect and talk with other people with muscular dystrophy. And there's people with my eye disease, retinitis pigmentosa, and all they do is try to connect with other people with retinitis pigmentosa. When in actuality, it's kind of all the same. The disabled community is huge, and a lot of like accessibility issues overlap, and I kind of want those conversations to kind of start mixing and mingling more, you know, and I'm kind of stretching it here based on what you just said in terms of being one-dimensional, but I kind of, you know, what you're kind of saying is kind of similar in the sense that like you want to see the bigger picture versus focusing on one thing. And in your case, you're talking specifically about politics. But I think that that's a common theme, and even outside of politics, just in everything. I think a lot of people are single issue voters, and a lot of people, you know, don't really think too deeply about the bigger picture. And it's frustrating, even, you know, for anyone, I think, who puts a lot of thought and effort into politics and pop culture and anything about life and what's kind of affecting society in the masses. You know, it's frustrating when you see something so clearly. It's kind of feels in the shadows at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, our lives are inherently political. You know, I always hate when people say, like, "Oh, Steve, why are you so political?" I don't have a choice. You know, every morning I wake up, you know, I have to look up if my healthcare is being cut that day. You know, I have to look up, oh, is it going to be harder for me to see a doctor? Is it going to be harder for me to, like, get on a bus? You know, that's my life. I have no choice. And there's no way around that if I want to live, you know, just a basic bare minimum quality of life that, you know, anybody else would get to have.
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with what you said. I agree, and definitely feel you on that thought, because it's actually affecting your day-to-day life. Whereas a lot of people, politics seem a little abstract, you know, because it's kind of like, yeah, who does, like, whatever, my life's not going to change if so-and-so's elected, because, you know, they got their own thing going on. They're not too worried about it. Whereas when some people, you know, different situations, it really does, like, you know, truly impact their day-to-day life, you know. And so yeah, that's interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up. Another thing I wanted to bring up was, so stand-up comedy, it's a huge industry of wide variety of perspectives, wide variety of sense of humors, and then there's like politically charged comedy, and then there's, you know, the opposite of that, there's some politically incorrect comedy, and there seems to be this division in terms of like a common thing right now is like comedians are worried about being afraid to say certain things or getting cancel culture and whatnot. But at the same time, I see comedians and and because I go to these shows and I watch a lot online, they'll be politically correct overall in terms of their messaging, but then they'll crack like a joke about someone who's disabled. And I'm like, okay, so you're making sure that you're politically correct, you're checking all your boxes here, but on that one, you think you get a free pass. And I just kind of find that like contradictory. And I'm just wondering, being in that world and in that universe, what's your perspective on when you hear a joke is targeted towards the disability community?
I mean, it's not that hard to not be canceled. Like, if you can't be funny without making fun of like minorities and vulnerable people, I don't think you're that good then.
Yeah.
Or you're just really ignorant, which is, the case most of the time. If you want to play a character, if you want to do a bit, that's fine. People have been doing that since the beginning of comedy. But, it's not that like people are changing or people are deciding that certain things aren't funny anymore. We're just saying like, hey, this was never funny, but now we're just able to get our voices out and make that known. But with the disabled community, we're always the ones left out. Whenever there's a conversation about diversity or inclusion or representation, we're always left out. So it's always up to us to be as loud as we can and make our voice heard. And it's getting really old.
Yeah, it's like almost like, because what I've noticed is, social justice, is like a huge thing right now, right? Everyone knows it. But like you kind of said, your disability community is a minority and it's pretty overlooked. And then you even have like intersectionality. You have like other minorities who are disabled. So then it's like it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and so yeah, it's unfortunate that it's kind of not viewed. I think if you ask people, they would say it's equal, but they don't think about it enough for it to actually be equal. Like if they thought about it, they would say it's equal, but it's just that my point is I don't think they think about it.
No, they don't think about it because they don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
They don't want to think about, what we go through and what it means to truly be an ally for the disabled community. Because they don't want to think about all the work that would have to go into it.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's a lot of frustrations across the board, but I think your humor is gonna help address these and familiarize people with the disabled community a lot easier than it's in a more digestible way. So I commend you for that, and I look forward to following your career. And I definitely got to catch a show. And we're not too far from each other here. But with that said, man, I know you're an incredibly busy man. So I like to end each episode with I let my guests give a shout out to a nonprofit or charity or just any organization that they want to put on people's radars that impacts the disability community. And I wanted to know if you had one in mind. Yeah,
thank you. I really encourage people to check out United NMD, November Mike Delta. It's a charity organization that helps people with neuromuscular diseases. And it was set up and it's run by people with neuromuscular diseases. So, we know exactly where the money is going to. We know exactly how it's helping people. And I think that really helps people be comfortable when donating. I've seen the effects. I know the people who run it. They're great people, brilliant people. And I encourage people to check it out. United NMD. Yeah, and for those listening, I'll have a link to the website. So just click the show description. You can find that and explore and check that out. And I also have links to
to Steve's website, his Instagram, and everything there, so you can follow him and keep up with him and see where his next shows are. And I encourage everyone to go listen to or watch his show, Rami, on Hulu. It's great. But with that said, man, I think that does it for our interview, and a lot of new topics addressed here that I'm stoked for everyone to hear and think about. So thanks for bringing everything up that you brought up.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this, and
yeah, man.
I really hope we can do it again sometime.
Definitely, man. Definitely. But take care.
Thank you. You too.
And that's a wrap on episode 41 featuring Steve Way. I really hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. I can't wait to check out one of his stand-up sets. If you want to learn more about Steve, click on the show description. There I will have links to Steve's website where you can find out more about him. And also I'll have links to his nonprofit that he mentioned. And if you liked what you heard on this episode, go check out an old episode. You know, there's 40 other episodes. I put out an episode every week. And if you want to stay up to date with this podcast, just make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever streaming platform you're listening on. You can also follow this podcast on social media. The handle is @SeeThroughPod. I would really appreciate it. And I'm super, super thankful that you listened to this episode and took the time out of your day. It means the world to me. Thank you so much. And until you hear from me next week, stay transparent, everyone.